At this week's convention, politicians talked about something that in the past politicians almost always avoided saying.
This explosion of debt is unconscionable and unsustainable.
An American government that continues to borrow money, that will mortgage the future.
When they say we have a duty to grow government, even when we cannot afford it, does it sound like compassion to you? Or does it sound like recklessness?
We have no other option but to make the hard choices, cut federal spending, and fundamentally reduce the size of this government.
Boy, they sound serious, but politicians have always promised cuts and then spent more. So, Mark, this year, did you hear something more convincing?
You know, I hear it from a wider chorus of people, so I like that, but I actually thought it was missing from Romney's speech, so that concerns me. The guy at the top really didn't talk about cutting the size and scope of government.
Well, he did say we will cut the deficit and put America on track to a balanced budget, which is pretty weak beer, to say the least. You know, in Paul Ryan's budget, which the Republican House passed earlier this year, if everything breaks the right way, you know, the budget will be balanced in 2040. We don't have until 2040 to get this under control.
But we don't have to balance it. We just have to slow the growth so the economy can grow fast.
One would hope. I mean, the Republican budget that that was voted on would mean we would go from spending about $3.8 trillion this year to spending $4.9 trillion in 10 years. That's not cutting anything. And it's certainly not going to, you know, I mean, we can't cut them slack on that. That's just, it's out of control.
And under $2 trillion just under Clinton.
That's right.
Wasn't chaos.
Yeah. So again, I mean, you know, it's not even like we're talking. These are people who are talking about topping off a gigantic spending binge that's been going on for 12 years, basically, and they still can't bring it in their minds to just say, you know what, we spent $3.8 trillion this year. We're spending $3.7 trillion next year, and we got to get used to it because we blew it all on hookers and cocaine, and now the bill has come due, and we're not going to be able to squeeze more blood out of a stone.
Romney's talking about bringing the government down to 20% of the economy, but it was lower under Bill Clinton.
That's right. His last year was about 18%. Sadly, Romney wants to bring it to 20% of spending of GDP, but his own budget projections
without specifics.
Yeah, of course. And he, by the, you know, he'll bring it down to 20, but he wants to increase defense spending. He wants to increase Medicare spending. He wants to make sure Social Security stays the same. But he also says, I mean, their budget is they're going to raise 18% of GDP in revenue. So for as long as that's in place, each year we'll have a 2% gap of, you know, of more deficit.
And you mentioned defense spending. There's this hysteria over the horrible Obama cuts and the sequestration cut. Well, here's this graph that shows the current plan of spending and the automatic cuts that would happen if this sequestration happens. It's not a catastrophe. It's not drastic cuts.
No, and it brings it down to, for 1 year, back to 2007 levels.
And more than we spent during Vietnam and the Cold War, adjusted for inflation. And yet the Republicans seem united that we got to spend more on defense.
You know, everybody's beholden to somebody in Washington, D.C., so you have a huge defense lobby, and they spend millions of dollars making sure that these guys don't want to cut defense.
So you're saying they're all prostitutes, that they don't believe it?
Well, I didn't use that word, but, you know.
But you're saying that they're just bought off by defense contractors? I think they really believe it, that we can bomb Iran and that'll work well.
I mean, the bottom line is, for whatever the program is, whether you're talking a welfare program or defense, Americans, from a common sense perspective, understand you can't spend money that you don't have. And they figured out, because the game's up now, that you can't just keep printing money to pay for these things.
You know, the United States is already spending about half of all military spending around the globe. It's like 45%. We can reduce that and increase our safety because, you know, the past decade of reckless and very expensive wars that we were constantly being told, it's only going to take a long weekend, it's not going to cost very much money. That was all lies. And, you know, Rand Paul was the one politician politician of either party, and at the Republican convention of all places, he said, you know, Republicans have to understand that every dollar that is spent on defense is not necessary or spent well. That's a message that has to sink into both parties, because the Democrats are, you know, big spenders on defense too. This, you know, when they're talking about, Romney's talking about Truman and Reagan, these are Cold War presidents. Cold War is over. Islamic threats are not existential.
Maybe we're naive. You're libertarians. You want to cut all this stuff? These guys are professional politicians. They know what works. They're not saying this. Maybe if you say this, you lose.
I think we can safely say we can bring the boys home from Germany. World War II is over.
I hope so, yes. Coming up, we go back to the convention where our... Welcome back to our post-Republican convention coverage. What do people who care about free markets and free people think of what we've heard? We have our all-star panel again, Mark Meckler, who founded the biggest Tea Party group, Hadley Heath from the Independent Women's Forum, and Nick Gillespie from Reason TV. So, Hadley, it was dodged tonight. I've been hearing about the war on women.
It wasn't exactly dodged, right? Romney did say some things about women. I'm not sure he responded the best way possible.
He pandered horribly.
He pandered.
As governor, I chose a woman lieutenant governor. Half my cabinet and senior officials were women. It's just awful pandering.
Right, he's sort of buying into this idea that if he has an equal number of women on his cabinet as men, that equal outcome measurement somehow means that he doesn't hate women or that he loves women, but it's an outcomes-based measurement, and that's problematic. He's having this argument on the terrain that the left has designed, that we have to measure things based on outcomes instead of opportunities.
And by outcomes, you mean what?
Well, parity is not equality. So we see laws like Title IX that try to, you know,
just as many women must participate in sports.
Right, and we see, you know, attempts to equalize men's and women's wages, which aren't productive laws either, because at the end of the day, the differences between men and women's earnings are largely a result of women's choices and men's choices, not broad discrimination.
And you represent, you work for the Independent Women's Forum, which I'm glad exists, because for a while all the women's groups were big government groups. And what's your response to this? The Democrats say the Republicans are waging a war on women because they want to restrict abortion.
Right. Democrats are making huge mistakes when it comes to women. Two things. First of all, they're making the assumption, they're working off the assumption that all women are the same, that women are a voting bloc. But that's not true. Women are 52% of the electorate, very diverse, rural, urban, single, married, young, old, have a lot of different interests. And secondly, they are narrowing the term women's rights, as they have done for years and years and years, to one issue, and that issue is abortion. When women are...
contraception.
Right, and women are interested in so much more. We don't sit around all day and think about abortion, abortion,
but
abortion.
Some
we
women
think about
can't
the economy.
afford their birth control pills, and government has to provide that.
Well, if that's the argument, that it's tough to afford and that it gives women greater control or independence over their lives, then I'm waiting for the government to give me a free car. Because that, you know, if a woman has a car, she can get back and forth to her job, she can have a lot more independence and control over her lives. Those are expensive. I mean, the argument doesn't stand. Women, you know, how insulting. In fact, it's very insulting. Did you see the Julia campaign? I mean, that was insulting. To sit back on my computer, click through the infographic, that government...
This was an Obama infomercial about Julia gets
campaign.
Her life through government.
That at every stage of my life, I have to say thank you, Uncle Sam, thank you, government, because I'm a poor, helpless woman, and I need Uncle Sam to step in for me. I mean, that's paternalistic, that's anti-feminist, and that's insulting to me as a woman.
And, Mark, you love this war on women. Why?
You know, this is the theme from the left that's been running for years. Republicans or conservatives have a war on women, a war on minorities, a war on handicapped people, a war on children. We've even recently seen the war on old people, right, with pushing Granny over the cliff. These are just simple fear tactics, and it really has nothing to do with the real, honest-to-God problems that are facing the country today.
Well, you know, to put one of the reasons why this stuff was in there, I'll give you a two-word answer: Todd Aiken. Okay, you know, the Republican Party does not do well with women, and unless women are totally fooled by the Democrats, maybe it's worth thinking about why. There is a widespread perception that Republicans want to restrict abortion rights. So if you care about that, and certain forms of contraception and whatnot. So I'm not saying that the Democrats have better answers. I think, you know, freedom is the answer here, and let people figure out how they want to live and give them the widest latitude possible. But the fact of the matter is that you hear a lot of Republicans saying we want to restrict or get rid of abortion completely. I mean, that's part of the sanctity of life argument that they're talking about.
Our live studio audience watched much of the convention and all of Mitt Romney's speech tonight. So what do they think? And what do you at home think? That's next. We're here again with Mark Meckler, who founded the biggest Tea Party group, Hadley Heath from the Independent Women's Forum, and Nick Gillespie from Reason TV. First, from my Facebook page, Donna Pignon writes, I hate that it's like a scripted pep rally. The minority voice is ignored. Silence, no debate. Me too. I mean, isn't that what a convention, you're supposed to have arguments about ideas?
I mean, really, the convention is an infomercial. It's meant to be a pitch. The debate comes when we have the debate.
$18 million taxpayer money that they voted that we have to pay for this.
That's outrageous, and we just shouldn't do that, especially in these times.
All right, let me go to the audience here. Yes, sir.
I hear a lot of rhetoric from the Republicans about how they were reaped the benefits of immigration and how their parents came in, and now that they were given this opportunity because of being immigrants in the U.S., why don't I hear them saying anything about opening up the borders for immigration?
I think that's a great point, and this is the thing that's so frustrating about the Republicans. Their rhetoric is sharp, but the reality of their policies are terrible. Obama is the worst immigration president in memory. He deported, in 3 years, he deported more people, or almost as many people as George Bush did in 8 years. And Mitt Romney is losing.
But now he has this amnesty program.
It's temporary, short-lived, and it affects very few people. It's a total symbolic gesture when he realized he was losing the Hispanic vote, which he took for granted. Mitt Romney is going to lose the Hispanic vote to a guy who deports Mexicans, like some kind of horrible Spanish conquistador. This is, it's really disturbing. The Republicans do not understand where the rhetoric comes from or what it means. They should be opening the border and saying, anybody who wants to work here, you're an American wherever you're living, come live here now.
On Facebook, Matt Allen says, it's just more pandering, more saying what most people want to hear. I'll fix your problems if you elect me. Why can't we get someone that'll stand up and say, I'll restore liberty, but it's your job to fix your problems?
Well, a lot of people have already decided who they're going to vote for, right? Every election cycle, there's about 40% of people who are going to vote for the left, 40 on the right, and there's this juicy 20% in the middle that everybody's after. But I'm curious, who among those swing voters watches the conventions?
Well,
who reads the platforms? Who, I think that they'll probably tune in for the debates, but I do think this is sort of preaching to the choir, time to rally the base. I understand it's kind of a big circus.
But wouldn't it be a shock and a good thing to say, no, you individuals, free people, solve your problems?
I mean, that's what I was looking for, certainly. And there are politicians who are saying things like that. We saw some of that in the lead-up to Romney's speech. Unfortunately, not in his speech. There are politicians like Scott Walker who are saying what they're going to do, and then they actually do what they say. We just need a lot more of that.
Yes, ma'am.
I've heard a lot about achieving energy independence and promoting free trade. Aren't these contradictory goals?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the phrase energy independence. It seems crazy to me. We're an interconnected world. It's a global world. We really don't want to be energy independent. The idea is we have...
Well, why not?
Well, because we are an interconnected economy worldwide. I mean, we don't want to cut off those nasty Canadians. That's not what this is about, right? We want to be trading...
Mexico.
Right, we want to be trading with other nations. It's a very good thing. It lowers prices. It increases standard of living worldwide. It spreads freedom and liberty. So we want to trade with the world.
But Romney talked about, I'm going to give you energy independence to create jobs.
The right word is abundance. We've got a lot of energy in this country, and I think what he should be talking about is tapping all of our resources. That's the real deal.